To the Tuesday, August 20th, 2019 City Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin the meeting with a roll call.
Thank you. Commissioner Abrams?
Here.
Commissioner Ackerman? Commissioner Briggs?
Here.
Commissioner Gibb Randall?
Here.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Here.
Commissioner Mills?
Here.
Commissioner Milstein?
Here.
And we have absences of Commissioners Sauvé and Woods, but we have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to introductions. Do we have any this evening?
Not this evening.
Great. Approval agenda. Do we have a commissioner that will move? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Minutes of previous meeting. Before us this evening, we have the August 7th, 2019 meeting minutes. Do you have a commissioner that will move? Moved by Commissioner Abrams, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal. Any discussion or changes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. Now we are on to reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, Planning Commission officers and committees, written communications and petitions. Commissioner Ackerman is not here, so we don't have a report right now from City Council. Ms. DeLeo, do you have a report for the Planning Department?
Nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. Planning Commission officers and committees. And then written communications and petitions. I believe we received one piece of communication, so please take a look at that. And we will go back in time for a minute. Since we're getting reports from various people, we will take a quick second and get a report for Commissioner Ackerman from City Council. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I apologize, I was running late from another meeting. City Council had a short meeting last night, but actually a number of items of your interest to you. First, excitingly, the city approved a contract with the Smith Group JJR to do public engagement around what is our vision as a community for the 415 West Washington property. If you don't know, 415 West Washington is a long derelict and underutilized city-owned property that sits across the street from the YMCA. So this is an exciting step forward in better utilizing that as an asset for the community. Another more clerical item: on an annual basis, the City of Ann Arbor updates its fee in lieu for affordable housing formula. This is a formula used for the PUD zoning district. If people are mandated by that zoning district to include affordable housing in their property, they're allowed to pay a fee in lieu, which we've discussed, and we updated the formula and the fee table in turn. Some ordinance amendments at first reading. The Glen PUD, the hotel on Glen Street across from the hospital, passed at first reading. Upon second reading, a few clerical edits to the UDC fixes that were caught that weren't quite translated from Chapter 55 to the UDC correctly. And then one change to front lot setback, passed at second reading, so they are now part of our code. The Garnet at 325 East Summit, you'll remember, was a C1A conditional rezoning, was postponed at second reading. General compliments about the site plan and the building itself, but some philosophical qualms with the zoning district being used, C1A being a near campus commercial district. And so staff and the petitioner will be discussing alternative zoning districts. And then 2705 Newport Road was annexed and rezoned from township to an R1 district. Two other items of adjacent relevance to this body that have to do with road reconfigurations, road diets. So I should say first, on August 5th, City Council reviewed 3 plans for potential road diets, which would increase the safety for pedestrians and cyclists on those streets. of those three, one moved forward on Traverwood, two were voted down on Green and Earhart. The one on Green is going to be brought back through a revised plan that hopefully will be consensus reaching at the beginning of September. And then Traverwood, the one that was passed, will be brought back up, I believe, at a similar meeting. Some council members and staff, I understand, have reached some agreement about slight revisions that will maintain the road diet and the bike lanes, but make alterations. So a lot happened last night in a short meeting, and more will come in September.
Great, thank you. We now move on to audience participation. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission regarding an item that is not on our agenda, and the only item on our agenda for this evening is pretty much marijuana. So if you're here about an item that's not on our agenda, please come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission. Seeing no one, we'll move on to public hearings scheduled for our next business meeting.
Thank you. We have two public hearings that will be held next business meeting. Hideaway Lane Planned Project Site Plan for City Council approval, a planned project site plan for council to revise the 17 unbuilt homes from single-family to two-family dwellings at 2000 Traver Road. It's a 4.6 acre site, currently contains a 9-unit apartment building and one single-family house, as well as one partially built single-family house and foundations for 2 single-family homes. The proposal increases the number of dwelling units on the site plan from 29 to 45. No change to the site layout or an increased number of buildings as proposed. Each new home will have an attached garage. Stormwater will be detained on-site and access will be from Traver Road. It is zoned R4A, multiple family dwelling. Another public hearing for Vic Village South, site plan for city council approval, a proposal for a new 13-story mixed-use building containing first-floor retail space and 133 residential units at 1100, 1104, 1108, 1112, and 1114 South University Avenue, and 609 East University Avenue, and 610 Church Street. Parking provided for 67 cars below the building and 4 surface spaces. The site is zoned D1 downtown core with South University character overlay zoning.
Thank you. We now move on to our regular business, and the first item is the Unified Development Code amendments relative to the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. And we will begin with staff report, then we'll open up for a public hearing, and we'll go into discussion and vote.
Thank you. I had prepared a wrong. There is a staff report in the packet along with ordinance with strikeout language. This presentation follows neither exactly, but it was prepared to help summarize and explain what is going on. A tiny bit of history. We have started addressing marijuana in our zoning ordinance in 2008. In 2008, the following terms were introduced and regulations established for patients, caregivers, medical marijuana home occupations, medical marijuana dispensaries, medical marijuana cultivation facilities. In 2016, the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act was implemented, and through that, or at that time, we inserted medical marijuana growers, medical marijuana processors, medical marijuana secure transporters, medical marijuana provisioning centers, and medical marijuana safety compliance facilities. And so now in 2018, we are implementing the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. We are now introducing designated consumption establishments, marijuana micro businesses, and marijuana retailers. I will first go through the amendments by term or by category, what we're doing, and then I'll follow it up by amendments by section. So amendments by term. Regarding the term medical, the amendments on on the floor are to remove the term medical from most terms or definitions. Example, medical marijuana facility is proposed to be marijuana facility. And you can see this little table. These are proposed to just make it more broadly applicable. Next, designated marijuana consumption facility. We are adding a definition, which is essentially where customers may come to consume via smoking, ingestion, or other means marijuana individually purchased through a state licensed provisioning center, marijuana retailer, or marijuana microbusiness. We'll be allowing these designated consumption facilities in the C1A, C1B, C1A/R, D1, D2, C2B, and C3 districts. They must be located 1,000 feet from a school, and we have included some parking requirements for this new land use. For marijuana retailers, this is the second of 3 new terms, including a definition, which is a commercial entity that purchases marijuana from a grower or processor and sells, supplies, or provides marijuana to customers. We are treating it as an extension, if you will, of the marijuana provisioning center. So it is being tacked on by a comma and treated as the same. It will be allowed as a special exception use in the C1, C1A, C1B, C1A/R, D1, D2, C2B, and C3 districts. It is allowed with special exception use as incidental or accessory to growers and processors in the M1, M1A, and M2 districts. They must be 600 feet from another provisioning center/retailer, consumption facility, or microbusiness, 1,000 feet from a school. We are proposing that the currently approved medical marijuana provisioning centers shall be deemed to also include approval for a marijuana retailer, and because they would be under that same umbrella, they would be counted as one in terms of maximum number of licenses. And a different chapter of code authorizes the city to issue 28 licenses. So as proposed, there would be no increase in the number of places that sell, and I say this as an umbrella term, places that sell marijuana. The places that sell would be capped at 28, or remain capped at 28, whether they be solely a retailer, solely a provisioning center, or a combination retailer provisioning center. And the third new term that is introduced is marijuana microbusiness. We're adding a definition, a facility that cultivates, processes, and sells or transfers marijuana directly to consumers. And note that it's and. They do all of those things. They cultivate and process and sell right there. It's not exactly like a farm-to-table operation because there's no consumption, but it is it's a little bit more one-stop shopping than the other categories. They will be allowed as a special exception use in the C3, RE, ORL, M1, M1A, and M2 districts. They must be 600 feet from another provisioning center/retailer, consumption facility, and microbusiness. They must be 1,000 feet from a school. The ordinance on the table says that 25% of their energy must come from solar panels, but we are proposing an amendment when this moves forward to City Council of 10%. We have been advised by the Sustainability Office that 25% is almost physically impossible given the energy uses that they need and the average size of a facility, and then how much square footage of solar panels are necessary. And we've introduced a parking requirement for this land use. Same topic, but if it helps to think about it a different way, amendments by section of code. So this does match more closely to the amendments in the packet. But we are proposing amendments to section 5.15 in the permitted use table. We're adding the designated marijuana consumption facilities, adding the marijuana retailer, adding the medical marijuana microbusiness, and we are proposing to remove the marijuana grower from the mixed-use districts. In the table, the mixed-use columns are the the commercial districts. They would still be permitted, the growers would still be permitted in the special purpose districts such as the manufacturing districts. Section 5.16.3G is the use-specific standards area of the code, specifically commercial. In this section of the code, we are proposing to strike most of the word medical. We are inserting the references to the MRTMA, which is the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. We are specifying that a marijuana retailer may operate where a medical marijuana provisioning center has been approved, adding micro businesses and retailers to the section that requires 600 feet separation. We are referencing and clarifying the maximum number of state licenses per lot. We're inserting a table to make that just clearer. We are not changing the number, the maximum number permitted. And when I say reference, so for example, in this, in that sentence and in that subparagraph, we're adding the term micro business or adding the term retailer. Clarifying and referencing the facility limits that are established by Chapter 96. We are exempting consumption facilities from the consumption ban. Adding, clarifying, and revising the required statements for growers and micro businesses, and adding, clarifying, and revising the additional information required with special exception use applications. In the off-street parking section, we are adding standards for the designated consumption facilities and marijuana micro businesses. And finally, in section 5.37.2, we are striking most references to the word medical, adding MRTMA, adding the definition for designated marijuana consumption facility, revising the definition of grower, adding marijuana microbusiness, adding marijuana retailer, revising marijuana infused product processor, revising safety compliance facility, and revising secure transporter. So as I mentioned, this was to help clarify and help make sense of this package of amendments that are scattered several sections of the code, and to sort of get at the high-level explanation of what we're doing. I'm happy to answer any additional questions or make clarifications. I'm also happy to, if there is a section that you feel needs to be a little bit further amended or revised, I can help assist with that. And with that, I will turn it over to the chair.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission on this item? If there is, please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this agenda item. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, and I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the amendments to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.15, Table 5-15, Section 5.16.3, Section 5.19.2, Table 5:19-1, and Section 5.37.2 to provide land use regulations for the recreational marijuana uses created by the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. Do you have a commissioner that will move? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gabrandel. We are in discussion. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got, I guess only two quick questions now. For the consumption facility, I think at the work session, this was kind of left as staff was going to come back to us with some recommendations, and I feel like those were the recommendations now, which is permitted uses in commercial districts for the most part. And I just wanted to toss out there to the group the possibility of that being a special exemption use instead of permitted. I just feel like it's going to be something where we're going to want a little bit more discretion. We're going to want a little bit more control over the work they put into their facility. It feels like more control would be better than less control for these. So I just want to put that thought out there to the group. Might be a little bit more work for us, but I think will be better for the community. Then thank you for the answer on the 10% for energy. That's great. And then honestly, I had a question about have all of our H's become J's?
I would say that we will be doing, staff, we will be doing another once-over prior to
Okay.
council for example, making sure that all the medicals that we wanted out were out, but the ones we want to keep are in, and things like proper cross-referencing and formatting and auto numbering and so forth.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I think overall, in terms of the use tables, I think we have the right uses permitted in the right districts for the most part. And when I say permitted, I mean allowed in any form. I think it's reasonably in line with what we did with medical, and also as we introduce the new dimension of recreational, treats it similarly to other substances that are out there and publicly available for adults. Yeah, and so again, I would just insert, I think a big piece we want to talk about, but would be a quick edit, would be just the special exemption use for those consumption facilities. Other than that, I'm very grateful for all the work that's gone into it, and I feel like we've had a lot of good discussion already. Thanks.
Commissioner Mills.
I had the same list as Commissioner Ackerman on my kind of what I wanted to discuss as well, and I really support your idea of moving to a special exception use, so I won't make the motion here. A question that I had is about whether we have the ability to limit the number of licenses like we have done on the provisioning centers. I mean, I know that's not in zoning, but is that on the table at all? Which would be for that other section of code that where we have said that we're limiting the number of licenses of provisioning centers for specifically for the consumption facilities.
I don't think that that is the purview of this body. I think that certainly you can perhaps make a resolution and to a recommendation for council, pass along your thoughts. But it is not part of the UDC, and so no amendments to that are on the table.
Okay, and there hasn't been something being discussed in parallel that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so I think that leads me even more so to suggest that treating the consumption facilities as special exception uses is in order. I have no idea what kind of demand there would be for this, but that kind of is some sort of check on how many we could see at any given time, just because they have to get through our process. But it also means that we might continue to be talking about this for a long time. I appreciate understanding why you're recommending the moving from 25% to 10%, because when I read the 25%, I thought this is a de facto ban. At the same time, I've recently been at conferences talking about how out of control the energy usage is for grow facilities. And so one thing that your presentation didn't note, but I checked in that here, and it's true, it's both for these micro, whatever they're called, the micro businesses, but also applying to growers, like this energy requirement. And so if the sustainability office is saying that they're okay with 10%, then that's okay. I worry, honestly, a little bit, that this is going to make it a lot harder for us to meet our climate action plan if we end up with a whole lot of growers. I don't think that we're really the place where people are going to be growing a whole lot, but I think that we need to be explicit about that there is a large concern among people who are worried about climate emissions that the marijuana industry, particularly the growing industry, is really stressing our existing energy infrastructure. So, to that end, what is I know that these facilities have to go through annual licenses, like license renewals. Is there any way that we can write into here that we need to make sure that they are actually achieving, that they don't lowball how much energy they're going to use when they apply for this permit, and then end up using way more energy than what they are actually providing via solar, because where we, the city, we see the water bills, we don't necessarily see their electricity bills, and so is there a way that we can build that into their permit renewal?
I cannot, at a high level, it seems plausible to be able to put that into the permit. At a high level, it seems plausible that that could be added into the permit requirements. This body does not do the permit requirement, so I'm not an author of that document. The UDC does contain some penalties for noncompliance. I'm thinking of the premium section. None are currently proposed or on the table. I would suggest that we could make sure that City Council knows that this is an important area for the Planning Commission, and that we can ask that a little bit more of the ordinance and penalty section be fleshed out, and to determine, maybe in conjunction with the attorney's office, what would be the best place for those provisions.
Okay, yeah, the word that struck me, and I don't have page numbers, and, oh goodness. It's in section 6, it's 10 pages into this pack. It's anticipated. When you're talking
Yeah.
about the energy requirements, you say 25% of the marijuana facilities anticipated energy usage, and it shouldn't be anticipated. Like, yes, to initially go through us, it's anticipated, but then I think it's really important that we say, and like, that I don't have the language. I think that you're right. As long as we convey this intent, like, I feel strongly that it needs to be reviewed annually.
Commissioner Gabrandel.
I have the same concern and a couple of just alarming statistics for us and to be able to pass on to City Council is that a growing facility uses about 10 times the energy that a regular office use would, just to put it in perspective. And one professional who studies this thought that for them to be net zero, they would have to have 18 times the floor area of their facility in solar to be able to make it work. So that's pretty sobering. The lighting levels match those in hospital operating rooms and are 500 times what's recommended for reading. And there are 30 hourly air changes that happen in these facilities. So it's crazy intensive. And I also am really concerned about this impact on, City of Ann Arbor, but just generally speaking, because another person who studies this said we can basically nullify any of the gains that we had from the Paris Climate Accord with marijuana alone, with the trajectory that it's taking. And so we need to kind of get serious about this. And part of me is thinking, is there a way that, so these places are in M1 basically, right? They're in manufacturing. Can we just require that the entire roof be covered? Because there's not a lot of light issues in those places. They're single story, they're not next to some high rise. Instead of the whole kind of 10% business, can it just be we require the entire building be covered in it? Just max out whatever you can. That's maybe one possibility. Another possibility, this would take more work, and I'm not sure whether this whole opting out, opting in terms of how we're studying it, that maybe it would give us some time to be able to think about this. But I know some folks are really interested in doing community solar, and is there any way that they have to kind of start to support that, to buy into that? And, the whole marijuana industry is not, this is like the only healthy thing in retail right now, basically. And so they can afford this, and they're also taxing our system. And we have to do something about this in terms of its impact. And so I kind of feel like maybe we can be bold here and say this is how we could get some sort of community solar off the ground is to be able to make something like this happen. Maybe that means that none of them will settle in Ann Arbor. Maybe that's what that means. But I just want to open it up as a possibility, because when I started looking deeper at the statistics, it was pretty sobering in terms of where we could go with this. And they can do a lot in terms of getting tighter with their efficiencies and all that kind of thing. And Massachusetts has done this with limiting their wattage. So instead of requiring a certain percentage, they say you can only do so much wattage. And what that's forced is a whole lot of hyper-efficient design around energy use and lighting and all kinds of things like that. I'm not saying we do that. I'm just bringing out other ways that people have been dealing with this as an issue. But when I started looking more deeply, I just felt like maybe we need to be a little bit more bold with this. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there as food for thought as this moves forward.
Commissioner Briggs.
Those are great suggestions and statistics. I concur with everything. I was at the Michigan Environmental Council meeting right before coming here, and one thing that I mentioned when I said I was coming here and this was on the agenda was, the energy usage. And so I think it's definitely an issue. I'm wondering if in Section E, where we have required statements from growers or micro businesses, if we might add a condition 4 that requires annual energy reports. And that perhaps that could be elaborated on by staff to identify what those energy reports are required. But it seems like one of the things that we can do is also help contribute to the research on this, in the sense that we don't know how many places are actually gathering this data, so we don't know how many facilities we'll actually have. But that seems like an easy way to start gathering information on exactly how much energy they are using too. And then it's not just the anticipation. So I don't know if that seems like something that we could include right now, or what your thoughts are on that.
As the commission desires, we could spend a moment wordsmithing, or it could be amended, directing staff to add a provision that an annual report be submitted, whatever the body would prefer.
Shall we wordsmith?
I will leave the wordsmithing up to somebody else if they have any sort of better suggestions. I'm sort of at annual energy report, and I know that there are some amongst us, Commissioner Mills, that are really good at this sort of thing. But I also think that there's benefit of just asking staff to add an additional, recommendation that we add this number 4 before it gets to City Council. And then there's some time and thought that can be put into this to make sure that it says what I think our intent is clear, and what's incorporated into that probably takes a little bit of thought, and probably maybe coordination with the Sustainability Office as well.
Would we feel comfortable voting on this, if in favor of this, if we let the staff handle it? Okay. Ms. DeVio, are you okay with this?
Yep, I've already made a note in the document, and I put a placeholder in.
Great. Commissioner Mills?
I did speed draft something as a starting point, and maybe some nodding. It doesn't have to be this exact thing, but some nodding might help staff see if it goes in the right place. So the change would require in item 3, the 3 I's, to strike out anticipated and just say that we're requiring the 10% of energy use. And then the new item 4, or IV, would be an annual report of the facility's energy usage demonstrating compliance with the preceding item, demonstrating that they're providing 10% of their energy usage from solar.
Commissioner Briggs?
I guess I would love to see it the annual energy report go beyond that to document what their actual water usage is, just like a clear report, not just on sort of energy, but all sort of, just that we're getting a report on.
That sounds, I didn't hear that part, that it was beyond energy, so I would
Yeah.
think that's fantastic.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
That was not clear in my. So I don't know if you need a motion in that, or if it sounds like you've,
I am personally following it. In terms of procedures, I think that the motion to approve would have to be noting as amended to include mention of annual reports of actual energy and water consumption.
All right, do we have a commissioner that will move that? Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Briggs, and discussion, Commissioner Abrams.
Sorry, quick question. What's the mechanism by which that report gets reviewed or evaluated and, like, that's not something this commission, this body does. So this is something they do to renew their license?
That's my guess. I think that we'll have to apply a little thought to it and work with folks like the Sustainability Office and the Attorney's Office about the best place to submit that and process it. Maybe it's also the clerk's office, but we'll have to take a look and find the right home.
But that's something that would go in the code or in licensing requirements?
That, at this point, I think that the Planning Commission has said that they would like it included as a required statement that that information is provided. I think the next level that we don't have it right at this moment is provided to whom. But that will be fleshed out by the time it goes to council per the direction of Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm assuming it would go to the clerk's office to renew their license, but then the clerk's office would then pass it on to whoever the appropriate body is, or a department. Okay, further discussion on that amendment? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that amendment is approved. Back to the amended motion. Commissioner Ackerman.
I'm going to go ahead and move an amendment to, for, in the use table designated marijuana consumption facility. It's currently marked as permitted in C1A, C1B, C1AR, D1, D2, C2B, and C3. And I'm going to make a motion to change each of those permitted uses to a special exemption use.
Seconded by Commissioner Mills. Further discussion on that? Commissioner Abrams.
So my memory from the working session was that the rationale behind that we heard from the planning manager was that they were being considered similar to bars. And that they, maybe I'm wondering if people who were there at the working session have a similar memory. That they were going to kind of being considered like bars, except that you cannot purchase marijuana at a consumption facility. So you kind of BYOM and then consume on the premises, right? I don't know if that changes anything or not. But I wanted, and then I thought maybe, well, I'll save this actually, not part of this amendment.
Commissioner Mills.
I think that that's certainly the rationale, and that's why I asked about the number of licenses, because bars are limited, the number of bars is limited by liquor licenses, and while I understand that they're not providing new marijuana at these facilities, like, again, one of the ways to limit how many there are is to make sure that with each one, we consider it carefully in the context of its surroundings, and give it some additional, review. So I'm sure that that's what led it to be permitted, just like bars are, but because there's no other, that's why I asked about the number of limits. So I think that that's why it's there.
Yep.
And I'm in favor of this, primarily just because we've done so much work around so many of these sites recently, and we've made them better, that I'm all for special use exemption. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're back to the main motion, back to the main amended motion. Commissioner Abrams.
I had another question about the use table concerning marijuana micro businesses and marijuana growers. Noticing that in the C3 zone, micro businesses are allowed a special exception, but growers are not. My understanding is that micro business includes growing. So I wanted to just understand a little bit that disparity. And then in the M1, M1A, and M2, again, why a grower would be a permitted use and a microbusiness be a special exception.
The rationale would be in the although growers grow, or micro businesses also grow, they are limited. Is it 150 plants?
Yeah.
But there's a number. There are a limited number of plants, and so I think the rationale was because of the limitation on the number of plants, they'll be a little bit smaller, more manageable, and the C3 fringe commercial for sort of our big box zoning district, they can fit in and be compatible with that district. They also have the retail element, and so that's commercial district. The flip side is, although they do some retail sales, but because they do retail sales, and that's why it's special exception use in the industrial districts. Not every industrial site may be appropriate for that retail component. You know, some have adjacent uses where the traffic deliveries, that thing, maybe it's not appropriate for retail customers. Now, that is all open for debate, but that was our reason for proposing it this way.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I have two questions, and I'm going to apologize in advance since I missed the working session. This could have come up then. One is just a clarification on the micro businesses. Understanding this is probably not part of what we do, but is that counted under these 28 licenses since they also sell? I wasn't clear on that.
I don't think they are counted under the 28.
Okay.
I think they are a different type of license.
Okay. Do we know if there's a cap on that? Is that anything that's important?
Well, everything's important.
Well, right.
Yeah. I don't know if there's because my familiarity is with Chapter 55, not 97. I would have to follow up.
Okay, but that's not something that we necessarily need to worry about, right? That would be,
Correct.
okay. Good to know that they might be exempt from that 28 licenses. My other question is just, since this is a newer thing in Michigan, but other states, obviously there's some like benchmarking in Massachusetts. Like, did you guys look at any, best practices in codes with marijuana facilities to come up with some of this stuff? Like, I'm just wondering if there's already some language around like some, pushing the envelope in terms of like energy requirements or anything like that that could potentially be borrowed from, if there are any best practices out there.
My gut says that it's a little bit too new in Michigan to have Michigan best practices.
Right, it has to be somewhere else.
Yep, I believe that, and I believe that much of our regulations is sort of inserted because of the language and the requirements of the
state.
MR, of the Retail Marijuana Act. And it is new. I don't know, 'cause I can't speak for the planning manager about how much research that he did. But I feel confident that he used the best resources that he had available at the time.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Ackerman.
I was just going to comment. There hasn't been any discussion at the city council table, which is where a cap would need to be discussed and implemented on the micro businesses. And so, while not immediately relevant to this body, if there never is a cap, zoning code can be a means through which you limit the impact on the community. So, for example, one of the early regulations we put in place for medical marijuana retail or provisioning centers was distance limitations. So they had to be 600 feet away from each other. I can't remember what it started with, but it landed on 600 feet away from each other and 1,000 feet from schools, public schools, K through 12. So I think, I don't want to put this on Mr. Leonard, but I recall from our working session that he indicated that because there kind of are already these 28 or will be these 28 medical marijuana provisioning centers that are going to most likely transition to full recreational, that the growth we see in the market locally likely would be through the micro business until caps are readjusted or we learn more and have to respond accordingly.
I also recall, and only mentioning this because of the working session, maybe Council Member Ackerman, or Commissioner Ackerman can help me out. The micro business is 150 plants, and one person in the industry said that might take up around 20,000 square feet in building size, and that with the 20 or 150 plants, wasn't it something like you could harvest like every 3 months, and the harvest would be getting like 50 pounds, was it?
The only, yeah, I can't remember exactly. It was 50 to 75?
My memory's like 200.
Yeah,
It was
okay.
like 200?
The only piece of
Well,
data I remember was that it came to an average of about 5 visitors a day.
I was just
Yeah.
gonna say, like, they would
that's an
be
average.
producing enough product
Yeah.
to, and because you're limited to 2.5 ounces to be legally carrying, it came out to in the order of one hand. They would produce enough to sell 5 customers per day.
Commissioner Mills.
And I would just add that now that you've had us look at the table, which is really helpful, this is one where they are special exceptions. So all these micro businesses will have to come before us. And so we'll have some sense of how, we as a planning commission will have some sense of how many are out there as well, for better or for worse.
All right, further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved with the amendments. We now move on to audience participation. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission, this is your opportunity to do so. You'll have 3 minutes to address us. If you'd like to address us, please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one, we'll move on to Commission Proposed Business. Is there any Commission Proposed Business? Do you have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Bills, seconded by Commissioner Briggs. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.